what if I told you there was a secret war fought for Bikini Bottom and the sea, and all the evidence has been right in front of us the entire time? To begin, let's look at Mr. Krabs, specifically his past. Now, it's widely known that he served in the Navy, and it's clear it had an effect on him. Now, I never see people ask this question, but why might Bikini Bottom even need a Navy? Usually, a country has an army to defend itself from outside threats. So having an active Navy begs the question, what were they defending themselves from? We get very few mentions of the Navy in the show. In the robot episode where it's thought Mr. Krabs is a robot, Squidward tries to call the Navy for help.
I'll evacuate the customers. You call the Navy.
Hello, operator?
So at the very least, we know in dire situations, you can call them. And in season 4 episode Shell of a Man, the episode revolves around Mr. Krabs wanting to still be tough in front of his old Navy buddies. And this offers one of our only looks at who else was in the Navy, and simultaneously proves that it is a large organization. And in the episode Pull Up a Barrel, Mr. Krabs talks about his Navy days and how he fought pirates, which I believed were the main enemy of the Navy, if Mr. Krabs wasn't lying. For one, the main pirate captain is a squirrel who can breathe underwater. Squidward and SpongeBob lookalikes are also there, but usually in the show's past, if there are lookalikes to our main cast, they're given different names or something else to identify them, which they were not given. This leaves me to believe he was likely lying about his Navy days in this episode, maybe because he wants to pretend that his Navy days were more pleasant than the reality.
After the war, Krabs stayed secluded in a deep depression that seemed endless.
That's right, you heard him. After the war, Mr. Krabs likely fell into a pit of despair because of what he saw and experienced in the Navy. We know there was an actual war of sorts, but who could the fish of Bikini Bottom need the Navy to fight against? Other fish? Well, we know the Bikini Bottom area is the only known area to have these advanced fish, because in other episodes like Feral Friends and SpongeBob's Big Birthday Blowout, that normal fish exist. They exist alongside our characters in Bikini Bottom. So other fish are most likely not the enemy. So who else would want to possibly invade and control Bikini Bottom? But what if I told you it's been the surface, humans and animals, this entire time? And Mr. Krabs actually can prove it. Now in the episode Hooky, we open with numerous fishermen, well, fishing above Bikini Bottom. And we see this sends Mr. Krabs into a panic, scared like we never even seen him before. He obviously has a more intimate knowledge of the dangers of hooks, but no one else seems to react or even care, which is strange. Well, I think if there was a conflict with the surface world, say with fishing, I bet it would have been very hard not to notice in Bikini Bottom. So what if the people already know to fear and avoid the hooks? I mean, it seems like a common enough occurrence, but Mr. Krabs reacts in a panic state, almost like he's suffering from PTSD. He doesn't seem to be able to control himself, and Mr. Krabs knows exactly what these fishermen do to these fish.
And then they eat you, or worse.
So either he was a victim, or even worse, he watched some of his fellow crew die at the hands of these hooks. That would explain why he fell into a depression, why he knows so much about the hooks, and since the Bikini Bottom civilians already know to fear and avoid the hooks, they don't treat this any differently than a normal day. But of course, to Krabs, it brings back painful memories. But alright, it's one thing to point out the hooks, but if the surface world did come into contact with Bikini Bottom, wouldn't the residents at least show some resentment or fear or hate for all things surface? But what if I told you we already have proof that the fish of Bikini Bottom have some fears about the surface? In the episode Don't Look Now, SpongeBob and Patrick go to watch the latest scary movie, which is titled Fisherman 4. Yes, an in-universe movie franchise about the horrors of fishing hooks, which, as established earlier, are a common thing to be afraid of. And after the movie is done, SpongeBob and Patrick are ready to leave, and what do you think they encounter? An old clock tower, the scary fisherman. That would have taken time to build. So what if they built that as a light reminder about the dangers of going to the surface and hooks? Alright, so we established the general fish population at least know to fear the surface. What about the surface animals? What about Sandy, who lives with them? What's her deal? Well, I believe it's apparent that the fish don't hate Sandy or mammals. In fact, it seems to be the opposite. They seem accepting, to a degree. As Sandy keeps to herself, that doesn't mean she's completely innocent. If anything, the fish's distrust of the surface is actually pointed only at the humans, as they're the ones hunting fish with hooks. And they don't seem to mind mammals visiting, but that doesn't mean they don't laugh at jokes at surface animals. We see in episodes like Pressure and Squirrel Jokes, the fish love jokes making fun of squirrels, even though Sandy is right in the same room as them. In Pressure, specifically, we see that even they have slang.
All underwater don't have to play fair.
I guess we don't.
air breather.
And in the same episode, we see that they believe in fish superiority, showing that there's at least a light rivalry. In fact, what if I told you Bikini Bottom has a longer history with the surface animals than previously thought? Isn't it strange to think about how much knowledge they seem to have about surface life, down to ice cream and music and other things? Why are those things underwater as well? But what if that wasn't a coincidence? What if those things were introduced to the fish on purpose to assimilate them into surface traditions and way of life? Now I know what you're thinking. Just because the fish are laughing at a few jokes doesn't mean they necessarily have a long history with the surface. Well, I thought so too. So I binge watched SpongeBob one night until like 5 o'clock in the morning. Now that was kind of pointless because I found the single greatest piece of evidence of surface animal involvement before the events of the show. In the short Saloon Day Sorrows, a continuation of the Western episode of SpongeBob Pest of the West, we can see in one short clip that Sandy has an ancestor in Bikini Bottom. How could this be possible? Sandy was born and lived in Texas, and I do believe that. So what is her ancestor doing underwater at this point? Why would he be there when there's nothing there? It's just a small town. Well, this is where the theory gets deeper. We need to figure out how the surface have infiltrated Bikini Bottom. Alright, it's clear. There have been some involvement from the surface in the creation of Bikini Bottom as we see it today. Life underwater mirrors surface life to such a degree, there had to be someone or an organization directing things. Why? Well, I'll get to that soon enough. But there's similar inventions like jazz and ice cream and burgers and cars, city life. Sure, sometimes there's a fishy twist like cars being boats, but underwater life is just like surface life, but underwater. Now, how exactly could this be? Societies left alone evolve and grow different cultures and customs unless they see outside involvement. Yup, I believe the surface mammals have directed underwater life in the shadows with a mysterious organization dedicated to monitoring and controlling Bikini Bottom. And Sandy is the key to proving this. We'll have to look at the episode Chimps Ahoy. Now this entire episode actually revolves around SpongeBob and Patrick trying to help Sandy by making an invention for Sandy's bosses. That's right, you heard me. Sandy's bosses. She's actually contracted by Tree Dome Enterprises Limited. The board of directors, who happen to be monkeys, control a company that makes tree domes, meaning there is more than just one. Who knows how many tree domes there are? Now another question is, why is there even a need for more? Unless they're lying. I mean, we haven't even seen other squirrels or other land animals live underwater. So I believe this organization is responsible for observing and influencing the entirety of Bikini Bottom. I mean, it would explain why a Texan squirrel whose family already has experience with fish kind may move underwater. And is it a coincidence that Sandy, a smart scientist, moved to the only part of the ocean with intelligent sea life and a glass tree dome controlled by other mammals? What if Sandy's Western ancestor was also a contractor from the same company? That would explain why and how he was down there. And this surface intervention would explain why the sea life seemed to replicate surface life, because they've had squirrels or other mammals come and live underwater in these tree domes, influencing them. But I know, there's little proof to say these unseen mammals are guiding sea life, except if we just look at the first Halloween episode, we can clearly see that it is a pretty normal holiday for the fish. So how would they have had known without Sandy? In fact, Sandy later introduces Christmas to Bikini Bottom in a Christmas episode. So before that, Christmas wasn't a thing, but Halloween was? Maybe we can say that Sandy's Western ancestor introduced Halloween, but I have absolutely no proof of that. But what if this is how surface traditions and inventions were brought into Bikini Bottom? But that doesn't cover a big mystery as to why. Why invest so much time and money into the study of underwater life? Well, Bikini Bottom is home to robots, complex machines, and cloning. But perhaps she's not just there to invent, but maybe to report fish-kind scientific advancements for the surface. And we can't forget the chairman for Tree Dome Enterprises Limited. They're all about inventions in the episode. That's what got Sandy her funding. So the surface already has an interest in the tech Sandy can make. Who's to say they're not interested in planktons or any of the other robots underwater? Now, since the fish of Bikini Bottom are unique and intelligent, it would make sense to keep tabs on them and study them throughout history. Maybe starting from when they built a little settlement in Western times. And perhaps they're still keeping tabs on them because of their rapidly advancing culture. Yes, it is a lot to take in. The entire history of Bikini Bottom can be thrown into question. Is their lives really in their own hands? Is Sandy really a friend? Does Mr. Krabs have PTSD? Is the surface world going to destroy Bikini Bottom if they feel threatened? Or maybe it just wasn't that serious, I don't know.